Right next to the filter section are two envelopes. They're matching sets assigned to different things. The first set I'll explain to you, then we'll move to the second. The first set is attached to the volume, the output of the keyboard. Normally the oscillators are droning all the time, as we heard before. They're running constantly all the time inside the keyboard. You may not hear them because the volume is turned down on the amplifier. The way you turn on the volume on a keyboard like this is to hit the key. It simply opens up the amplifier, lets the oscillators come through. We can adjust how quickly the amplifier comes on and turns off while we play the keys. That's this envelope control right here. The first setting is attack, which is how the sound comes on, how quickly it starts or if it fades in slowly. Here's the quick setting, a short attack. As I lengthen it, it'll get slower, a little softer sound. I can have a very long attack where it takes about 10 seconds to reach full volume. Depending on the sound you're doing, whether it be wind or piano type sounds or percussive or synth type sounds, you can choose an attack that suits your sound very nicely. At the very bottom, we've got a release control. Release is almost the opposite end of attack. It's when you let off the key, how quickly does the amplifier return to zero. So we've got a control here where I've got it set very short on release, very much like an organ. Quick on, quick release. As I lengthen the release, you'll hear it decay away. So it's a little softer release, the sound hangs on a little bit longer. As I go longer, a bit more like bells or something that rings out like a cymbal. And I can go up to about 10 seconds on those release times. So by combining attack and release, just these two knobs, I can get much more interesting sounds. We've got a very simple starting point, on and off like a switch. We can fade in. We can fade out. So you're hearing very simple changes to the sound, but they're very major ones as well too. When you're thinking of designing your own sounds or adjusting the ones that come with the keyboard, certainly you can work with these two controls to create new sounds. In between are two interesting knobs. They control what happens to the sound while you're holding down a key. The sustain level, right here, is how loud the volume will be while you're holding down the key. It originally rises to a peak during the attack time and then falls down to a sustain level that you've chosen right here. It can be half volume, full volume, or no volume while you're holding down the key. We have a control that ranges from the peak after the attack. When it hits a peak, how fast it will fall to the sustain level. That's our decay time right here. So let's adjust it for a somewhat short decay time, and we'll have it rise to the peak very quickly. An immediate attack. It will decay quickly to our sustain level, set maybe towards the bottom end. So the sound can rise up here, gets loud, and then it decays quickly to our sustain setting. Let's decay slowly. So this is nice. You can add a bit of an accent to the front of a note, and then it will die out and stay out of the way, but you can still be holding the note for a minute or two underneath the music. So the sustain level determines where your sound stays while you're holding the key. If it's up on 10, there's no place for it to decay to because it's already full blast. So the decay control will have no effect at this point if the sustain is on 10. But if sustain is on 0, the decay control has much more effect. You can definitely hear it working more when the sustain is 0. The sound falls all the way from the peak to 0 while you hold the key. One of the things people like about the Mini Moog style synthesizer is that it has very fast envelopes. The attack and the decay control and so forth interact to make a very sharp percussive sound. So people like to use it for dance music, anything percussive like that, because these envelopes are very, very fast and percussive sounding. Right next to the volume envelope settings, we have filter envelope settings. They do work the same way, only they control the up and down motion of the filter. Every time you hit a key, it starts this envelope playing, and it affects the filter setting. What we have here is the attack setting. Very much like we did with the volume before, we can have the filter attack. Very quickly, it comes on and opens up, or very slowly, it fades up. It's very easy to hear. The keyboard comes on right away because the volume is loud, but the filter itself brightens up slowly. On the very bottom, we have the same control as we had in the amplifier section, or release control. The filter can drop down, wow sound as the filter goes away. If it's very short, of course, the filter chops the sound off as well too. So even if I have a long sustaining sound here, the filter can actually filter the sound down to 0. And of course, in between we have the controls for sustain level while we hold down a key, and decay level to get to that sustain level. Let's play with that for a bit. Here's sustain level that's on 10. The filter stays open and stays bright. If I adjust the sustain level, the filter will drop to follow it. I can have filters sitting at half, sitting at 1/4, sitting at the 3/4, anywhere I want to put it. And of course, the action from reaching the peak after the attack to reach that sustain level is called the decay setting. So let's play with that. A short decay. It's very bright at the beginning. We get a nice blip on the front of the sound, very percussive, and then it falls down. So you can certainly hear that as it gets darker as the sound falls. My decay setting is adjusting how quickly it falls. I can fall very slowly here, but it will decay down to my sustain level eventually. So there's quite a bit of interactivity with how fast the sound fades in and fades out, where the volume decays to, where the filter fades in, where the filter decays to, and how both parts react when you release the sound as well too. So we've got quite a bit of control using these envelopes. At the very bottom of the filter envelope section is an amount control. It works in two directions. It works up towards the right and it works down towards the left. I can use my envelope shape, that rising falling shape, to push the filter higher, or I can turn it left and push the filter lower to go in that direction if I want to as well. Set in the middle, our envelope will not affect the filter at all. As we play the keyboard, the filter will stay steady. It's the one sound you can certainly use sometimes, but most times people like to use the filter envelope controls to make it go up and down. Here's what we've been doing. If I use less filter adjustment here, I'll send less of this envelope into the filter. It won't go as high. It doesn't push the filter higher. And of course, this can be good for subtle sounds when you don't want as wide a range. Many sounds use half or less of this control. Conversely, if I have a bright sound, I can turn the filter adjustment amount and it will turn down the filter. What's interesting about this effect is when I let go, it turns the filter down and then it releases. The release time brings it back up again. So I get a sound that restores back to bright. This was an unusual type of control for 1970s keyboards, so it's much more fun to play with it now. It gets you into the realm of some sounds the original Moog would never do. There may be a few times when you don't want to hold down a key and you want to work with the synthesizer. You might want a drone sound or be processing something coming in the external volume where you want to have it running all the time. So instead of having to hold down a key to turn on the envelopes and the amplifiers, they left a switch down here which is on external. And it will simply run whatever's the last note you played on the keyboard as the pitch. If you want to turn off the oscillators and just use the external input and play a CD through here, that's the best way to run as well too. You can turn off the oscillators, have the external audio on all the time, running through the amplifier and filters of the keyboard. It'll also allow you to trigger the envelopes from something external as well too, plugged into the back of the synth. Certainly an obvious control up at the top right is the master volume control. This is the overall output level from the keyboard. However, you can store these as sounds that go with the patch. If you have one sound that's very loud, another sound that you'd like very quiet, you can set this volume control and store it as part of the patch and make it part of the sound. Every time you call it up, it will either come back loud or soft. Below that, we've got headphone volume, which connects to the headphone jack. Everyone knows what that is and how it works. And on this model of keyboard, which is called Electric Blue, you've obviously noticed the bright blue front panel and the blue lighted wheels. We have a control for the lights on the front panel.